Well, good morning and welcome to today's speaker forum, looking at running successful work experience, which I think is something, in fact, in recent conversations with employers that I've been involved in, I've heard many times how much now employers are, firstly, when they're interviewing candidates, they're looking at how much work experience they maybe have they had exposure to the workplace. I think we're seeing increasing numbers of young adults coming out of education with no real experience in the workplace, particularly in professional work environments. So I think, increasingly employers are looking for those work experiences amongst young adults, interacting with customers, for instance. And I think young adults as well are more keen to do work experience and get some kind of insight into, the different careers, the different jobs that they may work into. In fact, I was chatting to an employer recently, and they were doing quite a sophisticated approach to their work experience. They had a nice little it was almost like a pipeline they had with their work experience, where they started with a lot of schools engagement. I'm seeing a lot of employers engaging more regularly with local schools. So they were doing mock interviews and career days. That was feeding then into their work experience program. That was then leading into often year-long placements. That was then leading into interviews for real roles, and often, trainees coming into the workplace. And even then they were looking at buddy systems for the new trainees coming in. So, I think it's definitely becoming a far more, regular thing that employers are involved in. So I've got a variety of speakers that we're going to be hearing from this morning. Do feel free to put any of your own observations or even questions through the chat box. That would be great. But I'm going to go straight away to Jane, actually. Jane, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Jane Sibley. I'm a people partner with BHP, which is one of the leading independent firms in the Yorkshire region of the country. And I have a special interest, if you like, in early careers and supporting the talent pipeline that we have at BHP, pretty similar to what Gareth has just spoken about.
Fantastic, thank you, Jane. And can I start you off, actually, because I think it's clear that work experience is evolving. I remember I did work experience, needless to say, many years ago. I did it at an architect's office, and for a week they had me sitting. They used to print out, the sketches of the houses that they were planning to build, and they'd have me colouring them in, green for the lawn and red for the. What a total waste of time. And I came out with absolutely zero idea of what architects actually did. And funnily enough, I didn't become an architect. So Jane, I mean, what's your view in the way that work experience is kind of needing to evolve?
Well, it definitely needs to move away from the traditional filing and making cups of tea, that's for sure. I think the main thing for BHP is that it needs to work for everyone, really. So as a minimum, I think there are 4 things that we feel it needs to deliver. It needs to be a meaningful experience, which gives an understanding, if you like, of what a career in finance can look like, and enables the attendee to make decisions about whether accountancy is for them or not. And that's something that obviously a weak data inputting and filing isn't going to deliver. It needs to be, I think, much more structured than that, and fun and interactive. It should also offer development opportunities for the employees who put together and deliver that experience, rather than being a week-long burden, if you like, on top of their day job. So, for example, presentation skills and the people who deliver at BHP are prepped for understanding learning styles, those sorts of things. And I think it should provide a sense of pride in BHP for the wider employee community in terms of CSR and how we interact with our local communities. And finally, it's an opportunity for us to identify talented young people early and to build and diversify our talent pipeline. We want to reach greater numbers without causing wholesale disruption to the business, and give access to young people, not by virtue of connection with a partner or a client. You know, we want to kind of mitigate those barriers to accessing work experience.
No, fantastic, Jane. That's a really, interesting observation. We'll come back to that in just a second. But I think, I almost think of, is work experience actually, is it more work insight now that,
Yeah,
we
for
want to
sure.
give these young adults, a real insight into what the work would be like, rather than just sitting doing something pretty tedious and manual for a few days. Going back to that last point, I think diversity is a really interesting point there. Now, I believe the way you run your work experience was kind of inspired by a visit you made to a local college. I don't know if you want to expand on that, Jane.
Yeah, so in the early part of last year, I was doing some work with a local sixth form college in an area of social deprivation in Sheffield. And they run a programme for their most gifted students, which is extremely strict, actually. So in terms of conduct, doing their homework, attendance, all of that sort of thing. And it's a one strike and you're out policy. And the final session, which we were involved in, was a programme of mock interviews with local businesses, and the teachers had kind of helped their young people get clothing for interviews. They'd prep them for the event with CVs and interview practice and all of that sort of thing. And on the morning of that session, their most talented young person turned up late in his sweats, and he was about to be red carded. And he said, "No, miss, let me show you this." And he gets his phone out and he shows the teacher a photo of him that morning, suited and booted, all excited for the day. And he'd come downstairs and his father had literally laughed in his face and said, "Get back upstairs, expletives deleted. No one is ever going to give you a job." So he was barred from leaving the house and until he got changed. And when I left college that day, it got me to thinking about young people like him. And for whatever reason, and this is not a judgment, I've no idea what the backstory is there, but for whatever reason, they don't have the knowledge or the contacts or the support, and don't realise that accountancy is accessible to them. And that's what sowed the seed, really, for doing something different.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a powerful, quite shocking story, actually.
Yeah.
And, for me, one of the real, I guess, joys of the last decade or so in the accountancy sector, particularly the way apprenticeships are now working, is that access and diversity that it's really promoted.
Yeah.
The kind of social mobility has changed dramatically since the days when I trained, when it was a much narrower, I think, talent pipeline. Okay, Jane, so how about the big reveal? So do you want to tell us a little bit how you actually structure your work experience program?
Yeah, so the idea is that it follows the process of applying for, getting, and carrying out a job in practice. So applicants complete a simple online form to get the job. The successful candidates sign up to what we call our Work Experience Academy, as they would if they were given an employment contract. When they arrive, they're inducted as they would be on the first day of a new job. And FI very kindly deliver some skills and behaviours training for us. And then they gain practical experience throughout the course of the week by following a case study of a hypothetical client business through our different service lines. And weaved in between all of that, there are sessions on team working and networking. And finally, we prep them and they attend a mock interview during which we give them feedback on their performance about the whole week, really, and also on the performance in the interview, as they would kind of receive if they were having an appraisal. So it's a career in a week, really.
Yeah, and I mean that's really inventive, creative. And I'm sure. In fact, I'm tempted to apply, Jane. It sounds really fantastic. Actually, it's a good way because as we all know, and work experience obviously is cross sectors. But in the accountancy sector, there are so many different career pathways that an accountant can go in. I mean, I'm often asked, what does an accountant do? And it's an impossible question to answer because what don't accountants do?
Yeah.
And it sounds like a brilliant way of just giving a bit of insight into all those different kind of pathways that somebody could potentially progress into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the areas where we kind of particularly struggle to recruit, because young people don't understand what accountancy is. And, in particular, they don't understand things like what a career in tax might look like, for example. We have a healthcare service line, which, young people often think we mean working in a care home when we say healthcare. So it's things like that. It gives us an opportunity to advertise, if you like. It's our shop window for what different careers might look like.
And let's say I was interested in this. I mean, how do you go about getting applicants? How do you promote the program?
Well, we're a victim of our own success, I think, a bit this year. So last year we didn't have much lead time, obviously, because the incident with the young person at the college was kind of probably, I don't know, March, and we decided that we were going to run this program in July, and we only actually garnered 12 applicants last year, but we've worked really hard since then to sell the opportunity. So the usual kind of website and social media advertising. We've leveraged our existing relationships with schools and colleges and careers advisors and the local education department and so on. And we talk about it at careers fairs and schools events, and we gather expressions of interest as the kind of years gone on. And then contacted students direct to say, right, the application process is open. And this year we've had 99 applications. Wow. So I think we're going to need a bigger boat.
And actually, the question I was going to ask, which is really relevant there, is how do you then decide, because you're not going to be able to fit 99 in, how do you then decide who gets the placements?
So the shortlisting process that we've used is, first of all, by filtering the year group, if you like. So year 12 for us is the sweet spot, if you like. It's the point at which students are making the choice between whether they're going to apply for university or look at apprenticeships post sixth form. So I filtered down to the year 12s, and then I redacted all of the information apart from the response to a question we ask about why the applicant wants to attend and what they feel they'll gain from the experience. And then the next filter was anyone who just said they fancy a career in finance or because I'm good at maths. So we were looking for answers which actually gave some insight into the young person, that they've thought about why they're applying and they know what they're applying for. Once we have that short list, the final selection was made completely blind by one of our partners who has a particular interest in the academy from a CSR perspective.
So it sounds like even the process of applying for the work experience is an experience of what it will be like to apply for work. I like that angle as well, actually, Jane. You've talked a bit there, and obviously the fact it's kind of blind, redacted kind of applications in itself, I think really services that idea of diversity. And so I think work experience, as you said right at the start, there's often a bit of nepotism around, partners' children's or clients' children's, who can easily get into these sorts of roles because they know the right people, and trying to make it much more open to all. Another angle of that to me actually is around cost, because obviously cost in itself can be a barrier to people doing things. I mean, what's your view on the kind of cost side of things, Jane?
So we've done our best to remove as many financial barriers for people applying to attend as we can. So we've kept the day to the times of the school day. So if a young person has an after school job, for example, they, you know, can still attend. We have an informal dress code, you know, no one's having to go out and buy a new suit, for example. We offer a travel allowance, so they don't have to self-fund bus or train fares. And throughout the course of the week, we supply lunch and snacks, so that if typically someone would have free school meals, for example, they're covered without being singled out as being different. So, as I say, we've done our best to try to think of the things which might, you know, cause people not to be able to apply.
Yeah, you know, even remembering back to my own work experience, I remember vividly sitting outside a pub where a couple of the people from the office were having their lunch because I didn't have the money to have lunch, which,
yeah,
you know, didn't feel great obviously at the time. Jane, fantastic, thank you very much, some great insight there. I can see there's some questions actually already coming through the chat box, so Jane and for other speakers, feel free to help out in the chat box. If you see any questions you can help answer. But I'm going to whiz very quickly to another part of the country and introduce our next speaker. Harriet, do you want to give us your backstory?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. So I'm Harriet. I'm an HR advisor here at Scrutton Bland. So Scrutton Bland are an accountancy practice based within East Anglia. So we have offices in Colchester, Ipswich, and most recently Bury St Edmunds as well. I've been here for about 2.5 years. I have quite a generalist role. But students and particularly work experience in the last year has been quite a big project for me in terms of looking at how we do things differently for this year.
Fab. And so let's kick off. Why do you feel that the way you deliver work experience needed to change?
Similarly to Jane, the word meaningful, I think, is probably going to come up quite a lot. I think the way that we've done it before hasn't been as meaningful as it can be. That's definitely one of the overriding reasons why we feel that it needs to change. We've also found resource in departments has been quite challenging as well. So, you know, when we've had people express an interest in work experience, it's been understanding the week that they're looking for, but ultimately the resource we've got available in departments for them to be able to take a student on for a week or maybe 2 weeks at a time. Also means that we were limited in how many we could accommodate across a full year as well. Again, sort of linking back to resource. And essentially the students that did, again, express interest, we were sort of limited on where we could place them based on whether tax or audit or business advisory had availability. So we wouldn't necessarily be able to place them where they expressed a particular interest. So variety of reasons really, but it all sort of links back to meaningful, I would say.
Fantastic. So do you want to expand a bit on how you then run a typical programme?
In terms of what we're going to be doing this year?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
Harriet.
absolutely. So we are overhauling in terms of everything that we've done previously. So we are really getting our departments to drive work experience this year. So we have put 2 dedicated weeks in across the summer. So we're holding one in our Colchester office, one in our Ipswich office. And we are going to do a carousel basis of all departments. So it'll run from Monday to Friday, but students will get a real, or applicants, not necessarily students, anybody that applies, will get a real overview of all of the different services that we offer as a company, as well as including a session with marketing and HR, because we really want there to be a focus on the human skills, the employability skills, everything that goes beyond just technical. So we're really getting our departments to drive it. So we sort of come together on a collaborative basis, and we've almost given departments a bit of a brief of what we would like it to look like, but it's very much over to them. They're getting their students and apprentices involved as well. So we can really make sure that we're engaging with the right audience. We're making it engaging, making it fun, getting activities involved. So it's going to be a real mix of a week, but we hope that one, it's going to be a lot more meaningful for people that come through. They will leave the week feeling motivated, inspired, and not just have a really great overview of all of the different areas of accountancy, because similar to Jane, they don't necessarily know where their interest lies until they have a real overview, but also getting some really good skills from the week as well. That's what we're aiming for this year.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So they've got, you know, not just a bit of insight, but some actual tangible takeaways. you know, my view is work experience may show some young adults that accountancy is not for them, and they don't want to become an auditor or a tax advisor. You know, that in itself is useful for them. But then if they've already, if you've helped them develop some, you know, softer transferable skills that will then help them, actually they do go become an architect, say, you know, if they've actually developed some communication skills that will actually help them in that job interview process, I mean, that's fantastic. And I love this idea actually of, you know, the maybe support functions and having exposure to that. You know, I guess, you know, your marketing, you know, and HR, because, you know, maybe that would be something they'd be interested in rather than becoming an auditor, for instance. And, you know, obviously firms have all these other departments that they need to staff. So yeah, some really, and actually, I mean, something you sort of touched on very briefly earlier was around, because I imagine a lot of staff would see helping with work experience as a bit of a chore and a bit of a, oh, I've got to look after this person for a week. How am I going to get my own job done? So do you want to expand on this idea of, you know, just reducing workload for the people involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that is obviously a main challenge. I think for a lot of people with work experience is trying to find them work to do that is going to not be too, that's not going to suck too much time from people that have got chargeable, you know, that we need to be charging to clients, versus trying to make sure we've got someone who's really engaged with us for the week. That is a, you know, really difficult challenge. So we just found from doing it this way that there will just be a lot of different people involved in terms of almost a project for them. And it's just great that we can get some of our more junior members of staff involved in a really great project for them, because that also can link into some of their apprenticeship skills, because they're going to be learning and essentially delivering some of our workshops. So it's not just great for the people that are applying, that are attending, but it's also going to be great because we're going to be able to develop our staff internally as well. And almost once the departments have come up with their day, essentially, the work is done. So we can sort of use this and enhance it year on year. So we're starting from where we are now, but once that's in place and it's up and running, then that's great, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We'll hope that we can enhance it, but take what we've got and year on year adapt it and change it. But essentially then it just means they've got one day, not a full week, one day where we can dedicate people across a variety of different people and levels at the department as well. Essentially means we're saying, can we have one day of your time rather than 1 week or 2 weeks as well?
Fantastic. Yeah. So, you know, I've heard a couple of things in recent weeks. It's firstly around that structure of the week being far more tangible and giving far better outputs. I think there's a couple of points already come out from both you and Jane around not just the benefit to the young adult doing the work experience, but actually the staff that will then interact with them. Maybe the insight they'll get into how young adults think. We've done a few webinars in recent months around, you know, mindset of Gen Z and, you know, recruiting. And I think spending time with young adults in itself is an education on what their priorities are. So there's that, but there's that structuring of the program itself, but also then that broader, how does it fit into the talent pipeline from very early school engagement through to the kind of work experience, through to the, you know, job application process, maybe placements, through to onboarding, through to training. So it actually becomes part of a much bigger whole, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it really does.
Fantastic. So what about the, you know, the benefits to the firm that you're hoping from this, you know, overhauling of the program this year?
Yeah, I think for us, it will, one, meaningful. That's great that we then as a firm can say we've really then been able to put something on meaningful for our applicants that apply, which in turn we hope will help to build our future talent pipeline as well. I think that's a great thing of work experience. You know, one, like you say, Gareth, it's absolutely understanding, first of all, those individuals that come, is it a career that they want to pursue? And but hopefully if it is, they will leave here feeling really motivated in terms of wanting to apply for an apprenticeship, and that's maybe something that they will then want to do with us. And we've already built those relationships with those people as well. So then when we open up our applications, there'll be people that we've already gained some relationships with, so we can kind of start to see that future talent building through a pipeline naturally in time. It also just means as well, I think for us in terms of another benefit is that we are then able to see multiple students in 1 week at a time. So, you know, a barrier to it before is where we've just been able to host one student for 1 week in one department. We can have 10 students in each office across 2 weeks. So we're seeing essentially 20 people in a couple of weeks already, then being able to get a lot more volume through. So that's also then really great for us in terms of being able to put just a dedicated week on where we can really put everything behind it to make sure that we're getting everything out of it as much as they are. So yeah, essentially there's some good benefits for us.
Fabulous. What about the benefits, do you think, to the young adults? And it's not even just young adults. I was talking to somebody recently who had somebody in their 30s on their work experience program who's looking to change careers. So I'm being a bit generalist there, saying young adults, but what do you think the benefits to the attendees on the program would be?
I think for them, it will be what they're leaving the week with. So, you know, they will almost get to start networking a bit without really realizing that they're networking. They'll get to build relationships with people that they haven't met before. So I think that's great that they're being put into an environment probably quite naturally, but not realizing the skills that they might learn in that week without knowing it. Because the big focus for us is as well, not just like I say, the technical, the employability skills. So, you know, that the additional skills that they may learn that they can really take forward into the workplace. So we will be looking at things like maybe some interview skills and some CV writing from an HR perspective. Marketing will focus on communication skills. So some really key skills that we then have identified as some gaps that we can sort of help to fill, that they can take forward wherever they choose to go, whether that's university, whether that is an apprenticeship or into work, that we can then really help them build some new skills for the future that can really help them.
Yeah, and those, you know, those transferable skills that actually are very relevant across different sectors, different job roles. You know, when I talk endlessly to clients and employers around what the skills required in, you know, accountancy are, and they never say accountancy. we can train them in accountancy. It's those broader, you know, the communication, the networking, the team working. Just brief, I mean, do you want to add anything to what Jane was talking about in terms of promoting the programs? How do you actually get the candidates?
Yeah, very similar to Jane. So yeah, we are currently advertising it on our website and across social media. So similar, we work closely with schools and colleges as well within the local area. And then recently our marketing team have also just done a press release on it as well. So quite similar, but for us, this is the first time that we have launched it in the way that we have. So Jane's obviously given a great example of the amount of applicants that she's had, which is amazing for this year. We are seeing quite a steady flow of applications through currently. But it'd be really interesting to see this time next year when we can reflect on this year as well in terms of how it lands in the way that we really hope it does in terms of where we can take it forward for students. But yeah, similar ways in terms of advertising it to Jane.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for your insight, Harriet. Really appreciate it. And I can see a bit of chatter going on in the chat box as well. So, you know, do feel free, anyone, you know, any of your own tips, insights, experiences, questions. I can see Jane's been answering a couple of questions. Thank you, Jane. But I'm going to turn actually, and it's just down the road from Harriet, actually, because Richard, I think, is also based in Ipswich. So, Richard, I mean, you are an employer, but actually you've also got other hats, haven't you, Richard?
Yes, I have. So look, good morning, Gareth. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, I've been working in insurance business for nearly 40 years. So I work for WTW, global insurance broker, but I also sit on the board of the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce, and I sit on the board of something called FIPS, Financial Insurance and Professional Services. And Scrutton Bland are actually a member of that group too.
Fantastic. Richard, the reason I asked you to come and speak, because we had a catch up a few weeks ago, and in fact, WTW has a very lovely sort of rooftop terrace that we had a little sit on overlooking Ipswich, which was very nice on a sunny day. But you mentioned something, this was more, I think, with the chamber hat on, that the chamber, I think, had helped facilitate to actually allow several organisations to kind of cooperate. Do you want to tell us a bit about that, Richard?
Sure. So a lot of the things that Jane and Harriet have said, and actually yourself, Gareth, about traditional style work experience, I absolutely concur with. And I actually think traditional style work experience is pretty much dead. You know, we have to do something more. We have to do something better. And it is quite difficult when you work. You talked about being an accountant. That's how I started, actually, 40 years ago, training as an accountant. But when you work in something like the insurance industry, or you work for companies within the FIPS arena, people don't really know what those companies have got to offer. You know, young people look at that and they think insurance, that's a bit boring, not interested in that. They don't realize that actually in this building that I'm sitting in here, we employ 1,500 people. 50% of the people in this building don't directly work in insurance. We have an HR department, an IT department, people that are involved in all sorts of different things. So I think a number of other companies were feeling the same way. And it's actually just before COVID struck that a few of us sat together in an office locally and said, wouldn't it be a good idea if we could work together? And this was originally facilitated through the Suffolk Chamber. And what was born out of that was FIPS, Financial Insurance and Professional Services. And it's exactly what it says. So that includes insurance companies, insurance brokers, it includes accountants, solicitors, lawyers, banks, all local companies, local branches coming together to work together. And one of the key initiatives that we've come up with is a work experience program, which is slightly different to anything we've done before. So the idea is it still runs for a week, but you now turn around and say, okay, for those 5 days, the individuals looking to do work experience will go to 5 different companies. So they can come to WTW on the Monday, they can go to Scrutton Bland on the Tuesday, they could go to Barclays Bank on the Wednesday, they could go to Gallagher's on the Thursday, etc., etc. And each day it's within the FIPS arena, but actually they're going to different places, they're learning about different companies, different opportunities. And at the end of each of these weeks, in the afternoon, we run a Teams call where we get all the students together, all the companies that have been involved in that week, and we do a feedback session. How's it gone? What's gone well? What's not gone well? Are people still interested in these industries, etc., etc.? Now, I did see one of the questions that was in the chat box earlier was, what can I do if I'm a really small company? This really works, because basically what you're doing is, as a company, you're committing to 1 day. You're not committing to a week. You're not committing to 2 weeks. You're committing to doing 1 day. Equally, you have the power to work with other companies that are also involved for 1 day over a course of a week. So you can share best practices, you can learn, etc., etc. Equally, you don't have to go out and look for your own students, because as a group we have increased power. So we work with the Norfolk and Suffolk Careers Hub, and they actually work with schools for us. So although we have our own contacts and we advertise this individually and we advertise it as FIPS, the Norfolk and Suffolk Careers Hub actually work between us and the schools and facilitate getting people involved and actually making sure that the people that come along are interested. So actually you've got people that are interested in the industries, multiple people in 1 day. I mean, we ran it as a pilot last year and we took in 4 students. This year we're looking to take a minimum of 4, it could be more. And we've currently got, I think, 9 companies that are involved this year, and we've got 9 schools that are interested in it this year. So you can do this as a small company, you can do it as a large company, you're committing a relatively small amount of time, and actually it feels like a win-win. And when I broach this internally, and bear in mind, I work for a global company, you know, 45,000 people, offices across the globe. And I said, this is what we're going to do. Talk to our internal HR department. They took about 30 seconds. They looked at me and they said, why haven't we thought about this before? So, you know, that's what we're doing.
No, I mean, yeah, another really creative, innovative idea, I think, there. And you know, I guess there might be a worry of, oh, are we going to be working with competitors? But actually, I see, particularly when it comes to promoting a sector and industry, you know, promoting the appeal of a certain sort of direction of a job. Actually, I see organisations are far happier to kind of cooperate and help each other out in these sorts of situations, because it's, you know, it's hopefully helping everyone, isn't it, Richard?
That's exactly it. I mean, you are trying to grow the brand of financial services rather than trying to grow the brand of individual companies. I happen to work in an industry which I think people don't, particularly young people, don't really understand particularly well. But actually, I think this could work across all sorts of different sectors. And it is about coming together. I mean, as I say, I've worked in business and in insurance for 40 years. The London market is traditionally really slow to change. And over the years, when I've seen things that have worked, they've only worked when people have collaborated. If people don't come together, it's really hard to drive change that works and sticks. And this group is really making a difference.
Yeah, actually, I mean, on that view of collaboration, I was hearing a nice case study recently, and it was from the construction sector where a variety of construction businesses had cooperated, and it was more around schools engagement because they were feeling like they were each going in trying to sell their own brand, their own company, and it was just confusing young adults. So now they cooperate and they go in and they sell the brand of the construction sector.
Correct. Yeah.
And then they worry about their own brands a bit later on in the process. So yeah, I think, you know, I guess, you know, our sector, accountancy, finance, could possibly learn from that in terms of selling what a career in audit's like or a career in tax is like, get the young adults inspired and interested, and then, you know, worry about your own brand and your own talent pipeline a little bit further down the line. Richard, fantastic. No, really interesting to hear about that. I think it's a great you know, great creative, might inspire people in different sectors, different parts of the countries to consider who could you cooperate with. And that means you're only doing 1 day of work experience. If you can get together with 4 other local businesses and provide a, you know, maybe even talk to the local chambers or the local mayor or combined authorities about whether they would help out. I'm sure it's something they would be very happy to support with. But thank you very much, Richard.
Very welcome.
Really great to hear about that. I'm now going to come to Steve. Steve, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself to start with.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see such a huge number of people here interested in work experience. So my name's Steve Thompson. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Form the Future. We're a social enterprise based in Cambridge, working with about 30,000 students every year in schools across the Cambridge and east of England. We organise in excess of 1,500 work experience placements every year. And we work with a large number of corporate firms in this area on some very, very specific work experience programs, and some of the things that have been shared today already kind of resonating in my mind as good practice that we've adopted with a number of these companies over the last few years. So lovely to meet you all. So Gareth, go on, load me up with a question.
Sure. Well, actually, I mean, there is a bit like with Richard. There's a specific reason that I asked you to come and speak, which came out of a fried breakfast that we had a few weeks ago, if I'm perfectly honest, a very nice fried breakfast at a place called FITT that some of you may know in Cambridge. But before we come to that, actually, I was just wondering, I mean, have you got any reflections on anything that Jane, Harriet, Richard have said, any of your own sort of general tips and advice for employers looking to make sure, I mean, we've had this word meaningful, you know, several times already. What are your views, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the first thing is, folks, work experience has really moved on now. You know, the traditional, and a lot of students still do this, but that traditional year 10, year 11 after exam week where you go and spend some time with a local employer, things have really moved on. Things are much more creative. Work experience opportunities run throughout the year. So we work on summer programs, for example. One of the things that, you know, if you're struggling to recruit, now is not the time to be talking to schools. They are overwhelmed with exam pressures. Even we who work with schools, you know, over 130 schools all the time, they're closing their doors to us now because exams are where the real pressure is. So work experience, you need to be talking to the schools much earlier in the academic year, probably in the autumn term, actually. And particularly if you're taking more of a social angle to things, where you're trying to offer opportunities to young people who may not have the connections through their parents or through friends or neighbours. It does take a while to get your message across and to actually enthuse them to apply for your work experience opportunities. So even applying for a work experience opportunity can be a barrier. particularly if we're looking at this from a social mobility perspective. So just be very wary that actually you don't make it too difficult for students to want to make that step to come and work for you. Do need to do a bit of a sales on this. So we work with one organisation that actually come and run what we call enterprise days in local schools. And then they use that as an opportunity to promote their summer programme. So that actually the students get to know some of these people and some of the expectations around that organisation. Very much in the school environment, it's a little bit kind of psychologically safe for them. They don't have to actually, you know, step over the line and make a formal application. But then when they then start talking about the summer opportunity, because they've already spent a day with those students, then it's so much easier for them, those students then say, yes, I'd like to do this. So there's lots of things that you can do to really help students make those applications. And I think one of the really, you know, a few big points that have come out are things like, you know, the whole idea around the carousel or the safari around a number of companies, that helps both you and the students. Thinking about how you can actually collaborate with others is really powerful too. Come to third-party organisations like us. We know what we're doing and how to recruit students. We're talking with them all the time. So come and use our expertise. I'm going to share some kind of like 5 key tips that people have maybe already talked about. But one of the key things I think that's worth considering is around how you can make those experiences really valuable to the students and valuable to the employees too. So I don't know whether I'm talking to people in the accountancy world. I don't know whether you do any social value accounting and use any frameworks, but actually all the time that you spend organising work experience, participation in work experience, those can all add to your ESG goals. They can, whether you use things like the TOMS framework or others, they all tick that box for you. So there is value on both sides. But yeah, there's loads of things kind of like resonating with me, but I'll share some tips as well with you.
No, thank you, Steve. Now, and I'm hearing quite a lot now already in the last sort of 3/4 of an hour around the way that work experience shouldn't just be seen as its own thing on its own. You know, it's very much seen as fitting into an overall talent pipeline, which I think is fantastic. Now, Steve, actually, and we touched on this very briefly earlier with Jane, but I know when we were sitting over our fried breakfast in Fitzbilly's, I was struck by the passion with which you talked about removing financial barriers for attendees. I think we were talking about kind of, you know, free when people do unpaid internships, but it got onto then work experience as a similarity. So Steve, I'd be interested if you want to share that passion again.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the world's moved on, folks, and you know, I think you all have experienced the undergraduate, graduate unpaid internship from maybe a decade, 15 years ago, and how that is just no longer acceptable to take someone, because, you know, the only people who can afford to do a summer internship are the people who can who already have substantial, you know, financial assets to be able to do that unpaid. And that doesn't help anyone with any social mobility issues, for example. So what we've started to do at Form the Future, we've been working with Cambridge Enterprise, part of the University of Cambridge. We've been working with a number of our corporate employers, is to really make sure that, that students aren't at a financial loss from doing work experience. So whether that's, if they're under 16, covering their transport costs, buying them a rail ticket, we do have some employers that literally pay for taxis to go and get the students from home to bring them to the office to make sure that they're there. If they're over 16, I think you should really be considering giving them a stipend of some form, or just paying them the minimum wage. We're a real living wage employer, so that's what we do for our work experience students over 16. But I think, you know, particularly going back to that social mobility angle, if you're trying to help young people who wouldn't normally think about accountancy or finance as a career, and, you know, it's been brought up before that actually maybe they've got a part-time job somewhere else, or mum and dad say, no, you need to go and get a part-time job because that's not for you. I think it's socially responsible now for industry to actually say, okay, not only are we going to cover your costs of transport, give you food, because again, there's a lot of students on free school meals, and therefore I think we need to relate to that when we're doing work experience. but also if they're coming to do good work, they should be paid for that work, particularly if they're over 16. So whether that's through a stipend, whether that's through an hourly rate, whatever it might be, I think it's on us now, in the same way that internships move from unpaid to paid. I think it's on us now, particularly for sixth formers, to actually ensure that they get paid for the work that they do. And you know, to touch on this, I'll send through the little guidance, some hints and tips now. I've got this phrase which is "don't be pret." Okay, so back in, I think it was 2017, Pret, you're familiar with Pret, ran a big program for 16-year-olds. They employed 500 on their big work experience week, didn't pay them. They offered them free sandwich. And it got into the news and it was covered in most of the national press. And there was a real backlash to this, that actually it looked a little bit like they were actually using these students just to fill vacancies for a week. And there was a lot of kickback, and actually they had to do a bit of a reverse ferret on this from a PR perspective. So my advice is, don't be pret. Think about all these creative ways that you've been discussing already about how you can actually start to build something meaningful. And remember, you know, when we go to work, we get paid. That's part of doing work. That's a fair exchange that we do. So if we're going to do applications for interviews, take people through that process, give them lots of experiences, and I think we should also be thinking about paying them too. But anyway, it's up for debate. We run lots of programs that form the future, and be more than happy to help any one of you in terms of thinking about work experience. But there's been some brilliant ideas shared already, so this is all great stuff. Thank you.
Fantastic, and do feel free to share the link to the website on the chat box, Steve. But thanks so much for your insight there. And in fact, you mentioned this idea of third-party organisations, and you know, some employers, particularly if they haven't done much with work experience, might, you know, not really know where to start, or particularly how to access the potential applicants, how to engage with schools. You know, the likes of Form the Future are very good for that. But actually, we've heard from a few employers this morning. We're actually now going to hear from a few third-party organisations in addition to Form the Future. So I'd now I think we've got Joe from SpringPod with us. Hi, Joe. Good morning. How are you? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning. Yeah, thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm Jo. I'm the schools and college outreach lead at SpringPod. Very usefully, prior to SpringPod, I was a careers manager in a very large sixth form college in London for over 15 years. So I've kind of been on the other side of this work experience issue. So yeah, hopefully I can share some useful insights.
Sure. Particularly, I think you're going to come at it because we've talked a little bit about, I think, predominantly, you know, physical face-to-face in an office work experience, but you come at it from an angle with virtual work experience. Why has virtual work experience become quite popular for young people, for schools, colleges, for employers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with COVID, virtual became a thing, but in actual fact, as you know, when I was in my old job, but when virtual experience came along, I was like, oh, you know, thank goodness for that in a way, because it just meant that so many more students could access these experiences. And it may, you know, well be, you know, you obviously want to use it in combination with kind of valuable in-person work experiences, but it just meant that it was more accessible. So, you know, I can think of several students who had significant caring responsibilities. I mean, it absolutely used to amaze me sometimes, these students that would have to dash back from college to make dinner for a parent or get the parent out of bed. And it meant that they could actually then sit on the bus and do some work experience and gain from it. So it just really kind of made it experiences accessible for all, I would say, to, you know, whatever their circumstances. And the fact that, you know, they were scalable in ways, so there was no limit on the number of places. So schools and colleges have really come on board with it, and they may well use it, as I say, in combination with other employer encounters. So that could be, you know, in-person work experience, it could be employer insight days, you know, but it's all part of a progressive program. So schools and colleges kind of find a space in their careers curriculum where they're using virtual work experience to kind of almost start that sort of exploration off. So if a student is a bit unsure about kind of what industry they want to go to, or maybe a school or college feels they need to broaden the ideas of the students, these can just be a really useful kind of starting point, really. You know, also giving access to industries where it's not always viable to go for in-person work experience. So it could be that that industry is not on your doorstep, so you're not, you know, you might be very restricted just by simply where you live. You might live in a very rural location where you haven't, you know, you can't go to the likes of Airbus or you know, kind of those companies that are just basically not where you live. So it just, yeah, provides that kind of, it might spark an idea, it might confirm an idea, but it's just another way, which you know, another resource for schools and colleges to use. And we do have schools and colleges that will use this over a whole week and get students engaged. And just the beauty of virtual is obviously you can just try something out. I mean, I always used to think, you know, if it was an in-person work experience and I had this where a student would just simply not turn up on the second day, and as a careers manager, I would be absolutely mortified, and it's really damaging for the employer partnership. But with a virtual experience, if a student starts something and they think, actually, this is not the career for me, I used to see that as a really positive you know, equally as positive outcome, because it means they're not going down the wrong pathway. So yeah, I hope that, yeah, gives a bit of an insight.
And I guess given, you know, so many workplaces have, you know, hybrid working policies and individuals may end up working remotely to a degree, I guess there's, you know, a logic that whether it's a full experience being virtual or even just elements of it, you know, we heard earlier from employers that have got multiple offices in multiple areas, so probably running the same thing multiple times. And whilst there is, I'm guessing, a value in that face-to-face, maybe elements of it could then bring them all together for some virtual sessions in certain areas, because that's likely to be part of how they work, I guess. But we've heard the importance of it being meaningful, Joe. So I don't know if you've got any tips on, you know, whether it's with virtual specifically or just generally for work experience. How can employers make sure it's meaningful and engaging for the young adults?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I mean, I would totally agree with what you said there. And a lot of schools and colleges will use this as a way of kind of almost sort of highlighting what the future world of work could look like for that young person, because just, you know, completing a virtual work experience where it's self-led, they're managing their own time, that's a skill in itself, being disciplined enough to kind of log on and complete the activities. But I think any virtual experience, for it to be really meaningful, it has to have that interaction. So you know, taking Springpod for an example, but there'll be other providers that do this as well. We make sure that every experience has got those tasks and activities built in. So we would work really closely with the employer to think of tasks and activities that will almost give the student an idea. Okay, so if I was doing this in my day job, is this the sort of thing I would like to do? I think any element where you've got sort of a way of the student contacting the employer as well. I think a lot of schools and colleges will they will then think that's meaningful for the student. So if the student has got the ability to kind of ask a question, so that could be in a webinar where they're asking questions, again in a safeguarding environment, because that could be a real barrier for schools and colleges taking part if there's safeguarding risks. So you have to think about all of that. A lot of our experiences would have what we call ambassador chat rooms. So the employer will gather together an enthusiastic group of volunteers that will be ambassadors. And that's been really successful for programs like the Met Office, where the employees of the Met Office absolutely loved it when the students asked questions. So it could be related to a task, or it could be, I really like the sound of your job, kind of, you know, how did you get into this? So having that, yeah, interaction, I think, is really, really important. And almost, you know, you want the student to finish a program wanting to kind of find out more, and giving that kind of perhaps suggestion of some follow-up activities. So again, a lot of our employers will use the virtual experience almost as a kind of a filter for the students they want to take on in-person work experience. So they will, you know, look at the work the student's done and almost use that as a selection. So then when it comes to the in-person, they're only getting the students that are really genuinely interested in working for that organisation. So that's been, yeah, really successful.
Or I'm wondering whether that might be something for Jane to consider. For instance, if you've got your 99 applicants for your work experience, could a virtual element be a sort of initial sort of filter for that? That's fantastic. So, Joe, what about challenges that employers might, or you've seen them encountering sort of choosing what kind of projects and case studies students would look at?
I suppose for some employers, it might just be like, where do I start with this? And I think if you've got an organisation that you're using that's almost taking that heavy load off you, so you've got a content team that will write the content for you in obviously consultation with the employer. So the employer would kind of outline, okay, this is what I want the students to gain from this experience. The content team will go off and write the experience, and it's kind of very much a two-way kind of process. I mean, other challenges, I kind of did write a few notes. My colleague John was going to join us for this. He works very closely with employers, but I suppose it's thinking
he's on a
about.
train to Liverpool, if I remember rightly. I think at the
He is.
moment.
He may, yeah. I don't. He's relying on train sort of Wi-Fi really, but yeah, I would say it's kind of definitely kind of, we're all busy, all massive busy, so it is kind of where to start. Kind of, I haven't got the time and resource to kind of be thinking about this. A lot of employers will want to know, what's the ROI for them, kind of what are they going to get out of this experience. So they need to make sure that whatever organisation they're using is able to kind of track that data and provide feedback, so you can also keep improving it. You might have challenges, obviously, convincing other people in the organisation to go down this virtual route. So again, organisations like us can help prove the impact by looking at kind of like stats from previous programmes and things like that. Other employers might be, well, I think this has already been spoken about, is kind of how you actually engage with schools and colleges. So it can be, schools and colleges are crazily busy, and it's a nightmare trying to get hold of the right people. So if we've already got that network of 5,000 or so schools and colleges, so we would already know the right people to contact and the schools that are kind of really happily engaged in this sort of activities. So again, I suppose it helps that you've got an organisation that's doing that outreach for you, really.
Yeah, no, I think that will really help an awful lot of employers, particularly maybe smaller employers who haven't got the kind of infrastructure internally to do a lot of these things. And I mean, thanks for your insight, Joe. I don't know if you want to do a bit of a shout out for SpringPod and just give a bit of the elevator pitch for everybody.
Putting me on the spot now. No, I mean, all I would say is just reach out and we can have a conversation. We've got all sorts of programs. We have, when students create accounts with SpringPod, they tell us what they're interested in, what sectors they're interested in. So we know kind of, if you've got particular areas of the country that you want to target, or particular groups of students that you want to target, particularly perhaps those from kind of disadvantaged backgrounds, we can give all that information. But I always kind of think the more the merrier, the more of these type of programs, whichever organisation you're going through, just really massively helps. And all the offers are slightly different, so I suppose you just have to kind of find the experience that kind of works for you and your organisation and achieves your objectives. But yeah, just reach out if you've got any follow-up questions. That was probably a really rubbish elevator pitch. You can tell I'm not a salesperson.
I think people who aren't salespeople are often the best salespeople because they're authentic, aren't they? But Joe, feel free if you want to put any links in the chat box to website, contact details. I'm sure people will be interested. And I know when I talked to John, I mean, some of the organisations that you're already working with are, well, national, global organisations, some very big brands. So yeah, no, and fantastic work that's very much needed. So feel free to drop any links in the chat box.
We do have experiences with Pret as well. I thought I'd better mention that before someone mentioned. Sorry, Steve. Maybe they created it after their bad experience.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joe. And actually, talking of popping things into the chat box, particularly, I know a lot of this content is relevant to all sectors. And we've heard from Richard in the insurance sector. We're actually going to be hearing shortly from the construction sector, but I know a lot of the audience will be in the accountancy sector. So I just thought I'd drop a link to, there's a social mobility initiative called Access Accountancy, which some may have already heard of. We've actually become a signatory for Access Accountancy, which is about exposing our young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds to the accountancy sector, and basically involves offering work experience. And again, they're a great kind of third-party organization to help facilitate that and help get links in with schools. And it's, you know, it's great for your CSR as well. I think being involved in things like access accountancy, I think, you know, again, helping expand the social mobility in the sector. I'm going to come to another speaker now. So Melody, I don't know if you would like to introduce yourself to everybody.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Melody Clark, and I'm from Speakers for Schools. If you hear the accent, yes, I am South African. I'm 2 years new to the country, so that's me. I've been with Speakers for Schools now for close to 2 years, so walked into this role. I come from a media and advertising background, so it was all very new for me to walk into work experience, and I'm like, what on earth are they doing? And for me, it was such a nice learning curve, because obviously coming from a country where we're not really much exposed to work experience. And if I thought back to when I finished high school, I was never really given the opportunity to do work experience, and through connections through my dad, which is obviously a Nepo baby. Unfortunately, you know, it's who you know. So for me, working with Speakers for Schools has really created that passion to be able to bridge that gap between young people that don't necessarily have access to be able to just get as much exposure to so many industries out there. I was going to present Gareth, but the audience has changed my mind.
Yeah.
So please fire away.
Well, I mean, we've had Speakers for Schools, you know, talking a few times over the last few years. I think particularly during the pandemic, you know, when everything went virtual and everyone was particularly trying to offer virtual work experience. So, you know, I don't know if you want to just give a bit of an overview as to those kind of virtual work experience interactions that Speakers for School kind of facilitate.
Perfect. So much like Joe, obviously, during the pandemic, everything went virtual. I think it's also given organizations a nice little taste and insight into being able to take that in-person work experience model and kind of like juggle it to be able to give access to a wider audience around the UK. And obviously, Speakers for Schools, we cover Northern Ireland, Wales, England, as well as Scotland. So you have a wider audience, and obviously we focus a lot on, you know, ages 14 to 19 for our work experience opportunities. But in terms of other opportunities that we also offer virtually, we have our National Book Club, where we work very closely with our publishers, Penguin House, to be able to educate and focus in on literacy. So that's another little angle that we've, you know, delved into. And then also our inspirational talks, which focuses more on teacher-led program where teachers will register an entire classroom virtually to be able to access speaker networks. And that could be like change makers, celebrity chefs, CEOs of companies, just to talk about, you know, successes, failures, because we all fail, but it's how you learn from your failures to be able to inspire young people that, you know, I come from nothing, but I've made this something, you know. And that is an age range between 11 to 13-year-olds. So very diverse audience from different backgrounds.
Yeah, and actually, I'm hearing more and more employers getting involved at an earlier age group than they perhaps would have done a few years ago, particularly maybe not so much around promoting their own employer brands, but more that, you know, trying to provoke interest in the sector, you know, trying to, you know, decipher myths about what, you know, in our sector, what an accountant does, what an auditor does, or even, you know, not sector specific. You know, I've mentioned access accountancy, which the name suggests is relevant to accountancy, but there's another great initiative called Rise, which actually is aimed at even lower age groups and is sector agnostic. It's nothing to do with any specific sector. It's about raising aspirations, again, particularly for disadvantaged young adults, and particularly at schools that wouldn't normally have employers going in. So, you know, Rise isn't about delivering work experience. It's more about going in and delivering workshops around broader soft skills and just raising those aspirations for young adults so that maybe they will consider a profession, whether it be accountancy or insurance or law, that, perhaps, and that still shocked by that story Jane shared at the beginning around, the parents can often be a blocker to the aspirations of the young adults. So, to bring in, other role models that they can look up to. And I think there's a piece as well that's been talked about around, the range of maybe colleagues that you would bring into these work experience. I've been in a lot of employers' offices when the senior managing partner comes out, drones on for 45 minutes about the organization's mission and values and the history. You can see a group of 16-year-olds utterly disinterested. Now, I do think there is a role for the inspiring senior person who's been in it for 20 or 30 years, but you've also got to have those kind of relatable role models, maybe bringing your current trainees, bringing relatively young people in.
Yeah, so with our programs, how I like to work with my employers is obviously bringing in the apprentice from the organization. If you do have them, in your offices, is to bring them in and give real life examples of exactly their experience and exposure from the day they started the application process all the way through to them sitting there in front of a desk doing so they like to hear from young people like that so that they can relate. So I do encourage bringing in apprenticeships to the forefront of your work experience, because I think it's relevant and speak to their level.
Well, yeah, and great experience for the apprentices themselves. They will be trying to develop skills in communication, which, so getting them to present to the work experience candidates. I mean, that's ticking so many boxes. Really fantastic. Now, I know, Melody, Speakers for Schools, you do facilitate virtual work experience and face-to-face, and in fact, kind of hybrid options. I don't know if you just wanted to share any thoughts on, how those different types of interactions benefit, or the opportunities that they give.
I know there was a question in the chat group earlier talking about smaller organizations. Obviously, with a smaller organization, time, flexibility, and availability speaks a lot about that. So virtual, I would say, and a hybrid module is a go-to, purely because it gives that flexibility for an organization, so that you're not constantly worried about where's the apprenticeship or where's the young people in the office. Is it going to take time away from everyone during those times? Where a virtual module is done in a setting like this, and you literally only need one person from the office to be able to run a session in the morning and another person potentially doing a session in the afternoon. So it doesn't really take away from productivity within the organization. It gives that flexibility, and it also gives the young people scope to understand the organization from different levels. So not just financial roles with the organization, but also non-financial roles like your marketing, HR, technology department as well, because technology and finance goes hand in hand.
Yeah, and actually, I don't know if I can bring Steve back in at this point, actually, because we were talking earlier about, financial barriers, and I guess virtual, from the applicant's perspective, may remove some of those barriers around transport and needing to, subsistence. I don't know what your thoughts, Steve, are on the sort of virtual versus face-to-face dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, we same as Joe mentioned earlier, actually, we encourage a whole breadth of opportunity because it creates accessibility. So, it's very important that there are going to be a number of students who can't necessarily participate in a face-to-face or an in-person work experience. And some employers may not be able to actually cater for them. So earlier I explained around our Cambridge Unlocked programme that we run with Cambridge Enterprise. The participating organisations there and the participating students is really about helping those students that never got that first work experience opportunity, because maybe they may have a disability, they may have some neurodiverse issues whereby they would find it difficult to go into an employer. They may, I don't know, they've broken their leg and just find it difficult to get around. So blending things is a really good way of giving some of those students accessibility to things that they wouldn't normally be able to go and do. And I you know, I'm a bit like Joe on this. I positively encourage all opportunity, because it breaks down barriers. It gives students the opportunity to sample things without necessarily committing. It means they can do it in their own time, because maybe they do already have a part-time job and they may have some pressure from home to maybe carers, etc. So I think it's really important that we offer as many opportunities as we can. The blended or hybrid model works really well. I personally don't think you can beat the in-person experience, because it is real, and it does give students the opportunity to experience a workplace. And that's important because it is different from school. They probably haven't experienced it before. So you can join these things up and give students an opportunity to experience lots of different things, and then offer these work experience opportunities as kind of like the end goal, which can then lead on to summer internships, placements while they're at university, jobs, part-time jobs, lots of different things. And that's why I kind of suggest get creative, folks. That whole concept of the week work experience, that's from the Industrial Revolution, when people would go leave school and spend a week before the summer break, basically as an induction into an industrial manufacturing setting. It's not like that for the vast majority of people now. So the work experience thing needs to move on, folks. And I, you know, come and talk with the people that have been speaking today about fresh ideas, because you know, we've got the opportunities to talk with students and career leads and teachers and offer this out to students. So, you know, go for it is my view. Don't worry too much. Just give it a go. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. And I'm almost imagining here, I mean, I've been doing some training recently, and it was 2 4-day blocks about a year apart, but the trainer actually then had, and they were in person, but in between every month there was like a 2-hour evening session online that you could kind of join if you wanted. It wasn't obligatory, and it was a good way just to keep in touch, just to practice some of the skills, and it created a real sense of community amongst the people on the course, which, so I'm wondering whether some, you know, virtual interactions could be used before or after the face-to-face stuff. No, fantastic. Thank you very much, Melody. Some really great ideas there, more food for thought. I love these sessions, just a number of different ideas coming out, and I'm hoping even our speakers are learning a few things and getting a few tips as well. But we have one more speaker to hear from. So I'm going to ask Sam, who, well, actually, Sam, do you want to introduce yourself and talk about the organisation and the sector that you're here from?
Thank you. Yes, my name is Sam Milson. I'm an HR business partner for Morgan Sindall Construction, and I look after the East region, so Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex and Cambridge. And we've got about 200 employees across the region, building, hospitals, schools, the Marina Centre at Yarmouth, those sort of things at the moment. So we are the professional side of the construction. We employ all the supply chain as contractors. So we are one of the main tier 1 contractors for the East.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sam. Thanks for joining us. So why did Morgan Sindall feel they needed to take work experience more seriously? Because I know it's something that you've put a lot more effort into in the last couple of years. Yes, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years. Well, being the construction industry, we are mainly male, and we are looking at a huge skills gap really coming up, particularly as we are also an aging workforce. So we really need to identify and work very hard at our pipeline of employees coming into us. So that was one of the main drivers. And also it's something that we're finding more and more increasingly that our clients are asking for, that we're demonstrating that we are contributing to social value in our community. So work experience for our local schools is something that also helped create that. So those are the main drivers for making sure that we're getting work experience right in our region. Yeah, so An interesting point there around almost, supply chain clients having an interest in, well, what are you doing for the, the good of the local community? I guess also, particularly where you're recruiting, Gen Z, say, I mean, I've done a couple of webinars recently looking at Gen Z motivators, and, they're very much motivated by, social causes and, what is it that the organizations are doing beyond just their job and the way they earn money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, can you tell us a bit about the programs you run in each of your offices, and particularly we've heard a lot about meaningful and impact. How do you try and work to maximise the impact they have?
We start off by trying to maximise our impact by building a partnership really with our local schools. So we might, for one office, for example, we've got a Norwich office, that's where I'm presenting from today. We might partner 2 or 3 schools in the local area, which means that we stay in touch with the careers lead for the school. We might go in once or twice a year to present career talks or go and help out with CV and interview workshops. So we start to build a relationship with them over the years, so that we're visible also to their students as a construction company as well, and put that seed in their mind that might be actually a career that they might want to go into. So that's where we start off, and then we ask those schools to provide us with students that would like to come to us, and we state that we would prefer to have 50-50 in terms of gender split. So that way we're already getting more girls interested in working for the business, because typically across construction it's about 20-80. So we're really trying to lift that up. And then in terms of the actual programme itself, we spent a long time making sure that it was engaging. So our programme consists of having a project that the students work on. Between about 10 and 14 we'll take in a week. It is in person. The week that they're here with us, they will all take on a role in construction. So we'll have someone being the design manager for the week, someone being the quantity surveyor for the week, the planner, the estimator, and they learn about what that role involves, and they have a pretend project to complete within the week. So it might be design a community building that is eco-friendly and has disabled access and can hold a certain amount of people, and they've got to do it on budget, on time, and come up with a design for the building. And over that week we will have our degree apprentices, who we've got about 3 or 4 in each office. So they'll be very much involved in that project all week with the students, because we find that the year 10 students that we're taking on for that week are far more likely to be engaged if they've got an 18, 19-year-old involved in helping deliver that programme, and I'm sort of saying to them, this is where you could be in a few years' time. We also have people from outside of the business come in. So the people that we work in our supply chain with and our partners, like architect firms, that sort of discipline, they will perhaps come in for a couple of hours, and they might show some of their CAD programs or some of their drawings to the students to kind of bring things to life, make it a little bit more interesting, so they're not seeing the same person all week. And we're very lucky that we're able to then perhaps take them out in taxis, usually to a site to go and visit locally as well. So then we'll take them around a site, do a site induction. So we try and break the week up for them. We try and get they'll see at least 10 different people over the week, so it's not too onerous on 1 or 2 people to deliver. And we're lucky that we've got the facilities to be able to do that and make it a really memorable week. We also make sure at the beginning of the week we do a survey. So we try and find out what they think about construction at the beginning of the week, whether they've got any interest in it as a career, and what their kind of perceptions of it are. And then at the end of the week, we do the same survey again to find out how much impact it has actually had. And we always find that it's completely dispelled some of the myths that they might have really had about construction. And we get a lot of people then who express an interest in doing summer placements with us and who want to stay in contact with us and then go on to do degree apprenticeships with us later down the line. So we've got people in our office at the moment, in all of our offices, that have started off on our Year 10 work experience programme and then applied a couple of years later for our degree apprenticeships. So we've found it has really worked in helping us with our pipeline, and it's really impacted our EDI as well. So we've had more females come in through that way because we've been able to open their eyes at Year 10 and say, this is what construction can really be like. And that's really helped us.
Fantastic. I'm loving that idea actually of sort of entry and exit surveys on, you know, given some of the comments we had earlier about whether young adults know what accountancy is and what accountants do. I don't know if that might be a useful measure of the impact of work experience in our sector to, you know, find out their sort of levels of knowledge before and after. No, thanks for that, Sam. When we chatted, do I remember, because I know you were talking about taking them to site, do I remember you saying that you take them to London?
We did. That's the first time we've done it. We did that a few weeks ago. So just had our Norwich work experience, and we took them on the train down to London because we've got one of our sister companies is doing an amazing fit out at the moment in London. So they were very lucky. It's the first one we've taken that far, to be honest. We usually take them locally, but we took them to London, and I think there were about 3 adults with them who also found it very interesting because we don't often pop down to London to go and see a sister company fit out. And yeah, we took 10 of them down to go and have a look. So the great thing is, as they go back to school and they tell their careers lead, that was amazing. We had a really interesting week. And then the relationship with the school just gets better and better because they know that that particular business, if the children they're sending them on for their work experience, will have a great week. So it really is helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, again, that idea of almost going off site with the work, just, you know, because a very common role in our sector and accountancy would be auditors going out to a client's premises. And I'm wondering whether in our sector we could organise the very same as part of work experience, where you're going to spend a morning out at a manufacturing client so you can go and have a look at their factory, because that for me was always the most exciting, interesting part of being an auditor, was getting to go out and see client sites. So I don't know if any of our accountants on the call might consider whether that's something you could build in, and, you know, talk to one of your good clients about going to visit their premises. That's a really nice idea. And actually, you talked there about schools. I don't know, do you want to expand at all on, you know, the way you use the work experience to kind of fit in with other schools' engagement, and what sort of other things you do with schools, Sam?
So most commonly we do go and do career talks with schools. We visit, so they're usually our partnership schools. We visit them and go, and we've got a number of things that we do, that we've built up a kind of library, if you like, of stuff that will go in and deliver to schools. So our current apprentices, and this is a nice, cheap, easy thing that you can do. We asked our apprentices a few years ago to do a vlog, a first day in the business vlog of how they felt about coming into work on the first day of their degree apprenticeship, what they were scared of, what their first impressions were. We did ask them to do another one in 3 months, another one at 9 months, a year, and then sort of 2 years in, and then one when they've completed their apprenticeship. They're only about, I don't know, about 90 seconds long each vlog, but you could really see from this first day, scared person coming into the business, then straight like through the next few years of their career, really, how they really matured, and they're still quite young at that age, so you could see they were actually getting older as well, and how that kind of felt going through that initial career path. So that kind of thing we'll take into schools, and it's a nice thing to chuck up on the screen in their assembly. And again, it's that relatable. This is someone a couple of years older than me, and look at what they're doing, and what actually a degree apprenticeship for us is what we try and really push in schools. So we think that's a brilliant way to get kids into careers for us in construction. So we've talked a lot about degree apprenticeships and generally coming into construction as a young person. So those vlogs are an absolute winner and a cheap and easy thing to do. And the children or kids, young adults, should I say, they're not children anymore, they are absolutely phone savvy. They know what they're doing. They're all taking selfies anyway. So they're all brilliant at it with the selfie sticks, walking around a site with a hard hat, and saying, you know, this is what it's like. So things like that, we try and keep it quite young, hip and interesting for them. We've got things like Lego things that we can take into school and get them to build stuff. And it's just staying in touch with them. And if they ask us to help them out, even if it's 2 or 3 times a year, if we can split it between different employees, we're also always asking for volunteers. And our degree apprentices, when they come in, as part of their interview process, we say to them, we'll expect you to give back. Whilst you're here, you will be involved in work experience programs and volunteering, because obviously they're kind of the relatable people in the business.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm loving the blogs idea, and even wondering whether, you know, going back to sort of Jane and Harriet, whether you could get your work experience attendees to be TikToking or Snapchatting while they're on their experience, and actually harness their social media to help promote what you're doing, which might then help you with breaking the 100 next time, Jane, for the applicants. But that's a really good idea, because obviously they will, like you say, Sam, they'll be far more savvy with, you know, the platforms and promoting it to, you know, that demographic. You know,
Yeah,
I think that's a really great idea. Well, thank you very much, Sam. Some fantastic insight to close us off there. Well, another fantastic 90-minute session. So I want to thank our speakers. So thanks a lot to Jane, to Harriet, to Richard, to Steve, to Joe, to Melody, and to Sam for finishing off. I think that's been absolutely fantastic. Some really great insights shared. We are going to be running further sessions on related topics. I know we've got one coming up later this year on running successful assessment centres, which maybe is another step down the road once you've got the work experience out of the way and you've got the interested candidates. I know more and more employers are moving to having assessment centres as part of their process for deciding who to offer jobs to. But thank you everyone for attending. I've seen plenty of good interaction going through the chat box, and enjoy the rest of your day. Looking like a sunny one where I am, but thank you very much. See you all soon. Goodbye.